Informative and unpredictable, testing the limits like only we can. From Span Enterprises in Rock Hill, South Carolina, it's the Bandit Room. And welcome to the Bandit Room. I'm Charles, and I'm joined by our special guests, Joel and Amber, today. Thank you for joining us, folks. Now, today we are going to be talking a little bit about interviews. Everybody has to go through them. Some people have the unfortunate privilege of conducting them, and we've got just some advice for you. Some pros, some cons, some good advice, some bad advice, things to do and things to not do. So let's kick it off. So some things to do before an interview. I think we all agree, number one, most important thing is to do a little bit of research on the company and the job that you're looking for. There's nothing worse, in my opinion, than going to a job interview where the candidate has no idea about the company and no real ideas about what the job entails.
Well, and I definitely think just being prepared all around. There's so many different angles that you can take. Obviously, knowing what you're going to interview for, as well as the company who you're going to interview with, but just other things to be prepared. I always drive by the day before so that I know where I'm going. It kind of just sets you off on a bad foot if you come in right at your time that you're supposed to interview, as opposed to arriving a couple minutes before.
There's kind of a magic window there that you don't want to be right on time, but it's also looks kind of weird if you're there like 30 minutes ahead of time,
right.
Because then it's like, oh, what do we do with this person? They're just sitting here, and what are you going to do?
Right.
Yeah.
So we kind of, I try to do like 10 minutes. I think that's a pretty comfortable, then if the interview is running early, they can get to you. If they're not, then,
it's not so long.
Right.
Yeah. I think 5 to 10 minutes is kind of like the perfect window. Right. It's not too early, but it's also not, you're not getting there right on time. So it does look like you were prepared, but not like, oh, I'm like, didn't prepare enough. I came here, overshot my estimated time here by 30 minutes.
And the interviewer's not wondering, where are they?
Yeah,
what's going on?
Exactly.
So, are they showing up?
Yep.
You get a little nervous when you're like, no, nobody's here yet. Yeah. Yep. So obviously getting there on time, knowing where you're going. Also, we work right here on a main street in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. So, the address is not that hard to find it, and so it always puzzles me when people end up like, oh, I couldn't find you. I was like way down the road, or I was on this other street. If they send you the address, it's not that hard to use your map skills to figure out where that location is on that particular street. I understand if there's several different floors, you might get mixed up, in like the suite number or whatever that may be for a building, but definitely.
Well, and even parking.
Google map it. Yeah.
Yeah. So parking is another issue, and that's why it's always a good idea to research where you're going and research what the area around it is like. Obviously, we are on a main street, but we're in a small town. If you were going, downtown and it was very busy, you would want to know what parking garage you're going to go to, and you just map these things out so that you can start your interview off on the right foot.
Yep.
Yeah, stress free, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be stressed and sweating bullets when you get there.
Right, you're already nervous.
Right?
Yeah, so you're already nervous. You just want to do everything that you can do to make sure that it goes as smoothly as possible.
Especially if you're going to be doing it earlier in the day, maybe 9 o'clock, or maybe toward later in the day, 4 o'clock, and you check on traffic as well. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Definitely, yeah.
So do your research, know where you're going, and get there on time in that proper kind of window. Not too early, not too late. Things to do before.
Well, and really the research part of it, you don't have to know every little detail of the company, and we're not asking or telling you to do that. But there's so many people who come, and one of the questions is, did you have a chance to look at what we did, and do you have any questions, and what spiked your interest, things like that. And they just look at us and they're like, well, no, I didn't. Yeah. And so that it kind of shuts down that whole avenue.
It's shocking how many people go to an interview not necessarily knowing about the company that they're applying for,
or even the job they're applying for, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's like, why would you not even care enough to say, well, if you just don't know, it's like,
Yeah.
what interest does the interviewer have left
Exactly.
in you?
Well, and I think a good, we've kind of given some bad examples here, but recently we had an interview where a gentleman came in and he actually printed out the job description that was posted. So whether you apply for a job that was on Indeed or wherever, he printed out the actual job description and he gave a reason why he would be a good candidate for each of those bullet points.
Right.
And so he really took the time to not only research the company, but also research the job that he was applying for,
Right.
and told us, look, here's a reason why I'm the right person. So that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's true. Because ultimately it's about proving why you are a fit for that position. And, that's taking it as literally as possible. You're taking the job description and saying, this is why I fit this description. I match this. So that was
Well, and I think ultimately you also want to stand out. There are some jobs where there might only be 5 applicants, but there are a majority of jobs like customer service or in the retail industry or the restaurant and hospitality industry where there are hundreds of applicants.
Yep.
What's going to set you apart from the rest of them?
That's right.
Other than just showing up to the interview, which, maybe 50 of them did and 50 of them didn't. But what's going to set me apart from all of those other people is that I did the research and I took the time to tell you why to pick me.
For sure.
Yeah.
And some things that you can do during an interview. These are we got some good things and some bad things to do. One big thing that most employers do not want to see someone do is have someone trash a prior employer. Don't go into a job interview and just run the name of your previous employer into the ground. I mean, I've heard people talk about how, oh yeah, I worked at so-and-so, but that place was so mismanaged, or that place was just horrible, and things like that. It's just bad form. It kind of, makes the employer think, oh, well, you'll probably be saying this about me in a year or so, So, definitely be careful about that, not to trash a prior employer, Any other examples of things not to do in a job interview?
Yeah, well, I mean, going along the same lines, I think it's perfectly okay, if you're asked, what are you looking different than what you're doing now? I think it's perfectly okay to say, I'm looking for something more challenging. Or, if a place was mismanaged, I'm looking for something with more structure. There's 2 ways to say things.
There's ways to say it.
And that really does make the difference of how are you going to answer those questions.
Sure.
Right. And the interviewer, based on that answer, is going to say, oh, he's very interested or wants to learn and be involved, or, just not care.
Right. Or the whole glass half full, glass, and that your first impression is huge.
Yep.
I would say one of the things not to do is to wear inappropriate clothing, whether it be too tight, too low. And one of my first experiences in interviewing, so I was still trying to get into the groove of, how to interview people. And this one woman, her pants must have been too tight, and when she stood up off the couch, her pants split out the whole back of her pants, and she was walking in front of me, and I saw it, and then I had to recompose myself when I went into the room to try to conduct this interview, and luckily I did. Luckily I got myself together, which if you know me is huge. But don't put yourself in that situation. Again, you're already nervous. You're already trying to impress a new person. You're under a microscope. We're under a microscope. Don't put yourself in that situation where your shoe breaks or there's so many different things.
So many things that can go wrong. So yeah, make sure you plan ahead. You wear something
appropriate. Yeah,
it fits well and things like that. One thing I was told is you don't want to underdress and you also don't want to overdress. It's underdressing is definitely a problem. Overdressing can be a problem sometimes if you're interviewing somewhere that's not exactly a formal environment. Not everywhere is going to require you to wear a 3-piece suit or something like that.
And again, I think from your research, you can kind of tell what the company culture is.
Right. Sure. If you go to the
Check
company website and you look at the list of employees and they're all wearing business casual, you probably are okay to show up in maybe one step above business casual.
Right.
You don't have to go three-piece, but maybe wear a shirt and tie.
Right.
You don't maybe have to wear a jacket or something like that. If you
Right.
see that everybody's got a white shirt and a tie on, well, you might want to, step it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, definitely, again, doing your research would definitely help with that
and you can
decision.
do that check out the company website, check out the company's Facebook, social media, things like that to see
drive by
photos of
at lunch and see
Exactly.
what people are wearing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's how bad it's really how bad do you want the job, and if you want it bad enough, you're gonna put in the time to prepare. And the people that just show up and they're like, I'm here.
Right.
You don't want it bad enough.
Right.
I want to see in your eyes and in your actions that you want this job, and that I am not going to regret putting you in this position.
Right.
Because something to think about also is, when you sit down to interview, that employer wants you to do well. They want this person to be what they're looking for. So think of just any way that you are the ultimate fit for that position, whether that's through both obviously the job description, the cultural fit, all sorts of aspects. Really look at the company and understand how I would be a good fit for that organization. That's what you want that hiring manager to say.
Right, and the applicant's really interviewing the business as well.
That's true. That's
So,
true. It's not just on the person interviewing for the
they
job.
have to look at you and say, are they what I want? And they have to.
Is it going to be a good fit for me?
Exactly. So.
Yeah.
I think another thing to be careful of is, a lot of times the interview, the company will say, well, why do you want this job? And I think you have to be careful with that. A lot of people we've experienced will say, well, because it's located in Charlotte, North Carolina, that's why you want the job. It's because of where it's located. And we get it. That does factor into, obviously you don't want to, interview for a job that's 2 hours away if you don't have to. We get the idea of being close to home.
Sure.
But that question probably is not where you want to say that, or at least not first, right?
You shouldn't show more interest in the perks of a job than the actual job. That's what the hiring manager wants to see. They want to see why you are a fit for the job, not why you're gonna really love working here. Because that's the same as saying like, oh, I'm in it for the vacation time, and I'm in it for the insurance, I'm in it for the
which are
PTO,
all good. They're all good aspects of the job.
Sure.
And to grow and to be in a company that has that.
Sure. And they're important
is
to
awesome.
them making the decision.
Right.
Of course,
Right.
Obviously, and that's part of them interviewing the company. They need to make sure that the company is a good fit for them.
Right.
As well.
Exactly.
Right.
But definitely don't. If someone asks why you want the job, focus on the job part, not the location or the perks or anything like that. That's not what they want to hear.
Yeah.
Another one. Don't assume that the person you're hiring, you're interviewing with, is going to necessarily know all the little industry jargon and acronyms that you used at your previous employer, because
especially if you come from a different industry.
Exactly. And
So,
people bounce around from industry to industry these days.
if you're going from customer service, you're going customer service, but then each company has its own language, basically.
Yeah.
So
Right.
So don't go asking about TPS reports or whatever that may be. So beyond personal questions, there are certain questions that you legally can't ask, and as a job interview, you need to be on the lookout. If you're going to a place and they ask you one of these questions, you might want to think twice about it, because there are certain things, anything that people can use as a form of discrimination, whether that is age, religion, things like that. Make sure you back off of those types of questions. Any other things not to ask?
I know. There's just those two that you cannot ask. Is like your age and
religion.
Age especially. You cannot ask their age or ask them their birth date. You just
roundabout ways.
Yeah, anything that gets their age.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah.
A lot of them will tell. A lot of like if the resume, they're like, I'm aging myself, and they'll volunteer it, but I understand. Yeah, you can't come out and ask.
Don't delve into it as a person looking into that. Now, there's a lot of debate about the question, what's your greatest weakness? A lot of people, it's a common question, people like to ask it, but sort of the negative side of that is you don't always get a great answer out of that question. You either get a fake answer of like somebody like, oh, my weakness is that I care too much and I work too hard and I work too many hours, That's my greatest weakness. I'm just too perfect. Or you get somebody saying, like, I don't know, a legit weakness that would be like a real problem. Like, I don't know, I'm not really good at dealing with people or something like that.
Or I don't really want to answer the phone anymore. Like, if you're coming to interview for a customer service position, probably you should not say at all, I don't care where in the interview, that you want to get away from answering the phone.
Right. Or not talk to people.
Right. Or I'm not a people person. Okay, well, okay.
I'm not a numbers person for this accounting job. Or,
Right, yeah. So, I mean, there's lots of different examples, but just be careful in what you're saying. Like, think about it for 2 seconds.
Yep. So, don't trash prior employers, and also don't trash certain parts of the job description. So, like, if you're interviewing for support, don't trash the idea of support. Don't, be familiar with what they're asking you to do, and don't disregard those aspects. Any other bad questions, things not to ask? What are we missing?
I don't know of any other questions not to ask. I do understand the thing about the greatest weakness. That's kind of like which answer you got to get.
There's no good answer.
Right, yeah.
Nobody wins with that question.
And the same thing goes with, disabilities. You're not supposed to, you shouldn't ask about, if somebody has certain disabilities and things like that. And if you are interviewing somebody, with a certain disability, don't delve into it. Don't ask them about, how are you going to get here? How are you going to, do things here in the office? That's definitely questions you should probably avoid.
Yeah.
Focus on why they're a good fit for the position and things like that.
And again, I think they are nervous, and they are asking them any of these realm of questions is only going to put you both in a sketchy spot. Like it's just not a good idea.
For sure.
I think it's also important during the interview for the candidate to come ready with questions. A lot of times we'll say, what kind of questions do you have for us? And they're like, no, nothing. We're good. And it's like, really? You know about us?
Really?
You know
everything? You have learned everything about this organization in this 10-minute time span that we've been talking.
And we try to cover, a lot of times we'll say, well, that's it in a nutshell, So we try to cover everything, but sometimes, we haven't even talked about our hours. You're not curious about our hours?
Right.
I mean, don't you want to know the hours?
For sure. You definitely need to come with questions. I mean, you can't. Yeah, I mean, and the hiring manager is going to be disappointed if you don't come with questions. Anytime I hear, nope, I think I'm good, I'm just shocked. I'm like, what? No way. There's no way you don't have further questions about this. We have been very brief here. This has been
That must mean you wrote a great job description.
Right.
Everything they need to know is in the job description.
We do write 100-page job descriptions.
Right, yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, I think that's...
So definitely come with, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have 10 questions, 3 questions. Or,
sure.
And obviously make them pertain to you. Don't just go search Google, what interview questions should I ask?
Right.
Make them applicable to what you're doing and what you're searching for and what you're looking for. And I think there's so many jobs out there. Go find something that you enjoy to do. And I'm always fond of saying, there's so many different avenues that you can go down. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, and if you have to go home and drink to come back the next day,
it's probably not worth doing.
It's not worth doing. So let's, really, just like Joel said, interview the company as well and find out, ask those questions. Is this somewhere that I can see myself fitting in and enjoying what I do?
Yeah. And on the questions thing about, don't just come with a preset list of questions.
Right.
I think the most effective way of asking questions in an interview is through an engaging conversation.
Right.
So when the employer is telling you little bits about the work that they do and things like that, piggyback on the things that they're telling you. Like, oh, you mentioned you have this product. How does that work? Or what is this? And it shows that you're curious, you're inquisitive, you're ready to learn.
Well, and you're engaged in the interview, you're here, because there's so many times that we'll be interviewing and we'll say, what's your ideal job?
Right.
Well, I want to work, and it's like. Okay, that's it.
Right.
I mean, we have to pull an answer out of some people, and that again makes it hard just as if they hadn't prepared or hadn't researched, or, when they're just, teeny tiny little bits of information, it doesn't show that you're really engaged in the interview. Right. And again, it doesn't show that you want the job.
Yeah. And if you do come with questions, occasionally some people do come with a handful of questions, it'll be, kind of a set one, like, oh, well, why do you like this job? Or what made you decide to work here? Which is a fair question. It's a good question. But at the same time, it's a standard, it's one that hiring managers are going to get from time to time. What's really most important is that engaging conversation,
right.
Showing that you're interested in the work that they do, you care about it, and you want to learn more.
Yeah.
I think that's...
And again, you're different. If you come with a set, 4 questions that we hear all the time, I want to know I want to know, without saying, what makes you different or what sets you apart, which I think was on that list of questions that are kind of
the engaging questions need to come from the interviewer as well.
Right.
I mean, you can't just ask these dull questions of somebody. They're going to give you dull answers back because they may want to match what you're saying.
That's
right.
So definitely think, as an interviewer, you need to think about your questions and make them interesting,
right.
Make them so that they're open-ended and you can have a discussion about them.
No, it's a two-way street for sure.
Absolutely.
You get on what you put in. That's definitely true.
A lot of times, though, if we ask an open-ended question, so, at this job, tell me where your strengths were, or tell me, there was a time where you had a difficult customer, and how did you handle that, and what was the outcome? It's kind of just a generic, this person called in and they were really mad, and, it's just, some of those open-ended questions, I agree that they're good to ask, but sometimes, we'll say, I see you have a background in sales. We do a mixture here of incoming and outbound, and we kind of, would you be okay with that? Or is that something you're interested in? Well, absolutely. Yeah, I'm interested in sales. And the second week here, they're like, I have to call.
I can't make out that call.
Right. So sometimes I get jumbled up with that.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, because you have to, ultimately you have to demonstrate it in the interview, because it's not enough to simply say, oh yes, I'm totally on board with making outbound calls from time to time. You need to show that you really care about growing a business. You've shown that in your prior experience, that you do what it takes to get out there and get a product out there and grow a business as much as you can. It's not enough to simply oh yeah, I'm on board with that, or yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Now something else to consider, whenever you're applying for a job, obviously there's a lot of factors you need to think about when trying to assess what the salary is going to be. Obviously you kind of know by a general job description or a job title, the range for that. Of course, that's going to vary by, the area of the country you're in, what kind of setting that may be. But at the same time, you need to know, if you're expecting a certain amount, you probably shouldn't apply for a position that's clearly an entry-level type position,
Yeah, there's definitely been times where we've interviewed and, impressive interview. And, a lot of what we're talking about is what not to do. But there's also some really good people who interview well. And so, they've done their research. They came with questions. They were dressed professionally. They were here on time. So they did everything right, if you were going by textbook standards. And a lot of times the person that you are interviewing with will ask you what range you need in salary, because there's no sense in them wasting their time if you're priced too high, and we don't want to waste your time either. So, for second round interviews and things like that. So, in one instance, this person did everything right. They had a bang out interview. It was top of the line. It was good. A wonderful resume. I mean, this was a good interview. And then he sent a follow-up email, which we're going to talk about as well, following up after the interview. So he sent a follow-up email, and when it came time for the salary question, he said, you know what? Let me think on that. I want to research the company a little bit more. I don't want to lowball myself, but I don't want to price myself too high, which again...
That's a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
That's obviously the way to go. If you're looking for a job, make sure your number is your number, and you need to make sure that matches up with what the company's looking for.
Right. So he sent a follow-up email a day later, maybe 2 days later, and he said, you know what, I've thought about the position, and I am going to price myself at X amount of dollars. It was 40 grand above an entry level position. And so it was kind of like, whoa, it's just, it kind of took us for a loop, because here, A+ across the board. Went home and researched a little bit more, and talk about highballing. You highballed $40,000.
It was a significant.
That's a lot.
It was a leap for us. Yeah. And different companies are going to operate different ways. You kind of know the type of employer that you're looking for.
And that's something to research too.
Exactly.
Like research that for your area, and research. I'm going into the food industry. This is how much a server makes in my area. It's going to give you a range. It's not going to give you an exact dollar amount.
Right.
But again, research the range. Know what you're talking about when you go in there.
Another thing on salary, one funny example is don't just Google what does a blank make, just the standard Google answer on that. It's going to give you a composite. It's not going to give you necessarily, an entry level or based on your location. It's not going to accommodate, whether the pay is higher or lower based on where you are. So that's something else to consider. We've had people come in with zero experience and expect to be making like the median amount for whatever that particular job is, which is generally factoring that you have an average of a few years of experience, and it's going to average in the big cities, the small cities, things like that. So it's generally going to be higher than an entry level spot at a relatively smaller.
Especially if all the data is from the West Coast.
Right. It's based on data purely in California.
Well, and I think too, and not to lowball yourself, but to come into a company, especially smaller companies, come in, prove yourself in the position that you are given, and then the company is either going to notice and they are going to move you up, or when it comes time for your review, year-end bonuses, when there is a promotion, they're going to take notice that, this person, they came in at a fair amount. They came in using a fair salary and has done an amazing job. They go over and beyond. They stay late. They come in, whatever it is. Do what you need to do here so that when it's time for a promotion, without a doubt, they're like, you know what, Joel, he's ready. Let's go. Right. And they don't have to question, who are we going to promote?
Right.
They know.
Yep. I think that wraps up what we can talk about for things during the interview. We're going to take a brief break, and we'll be back to talk about what you can do after the interview.
I'm so happy, lucky me. I just go my way, living every day. I don't worrying don't agree. Things that bother you never bother me. Things that bother you never bother me. I feel happy and fine, ha-ha. Living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time. Having got a lot, I don't need a lot, coffee's only a dime. Living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time.
While filing legal documents might hold you up, at Express Tax Filings, our goal is to get you back out there faster, efficiently, and securely e-file your tax forms online.
Next.
And we're back to talk about more of what you can do after an interview. Now, Amber alluded to this earlier. Obviously, the most important thing you can do after an interview is send a little follow-up, whether that's an email, an actual card. That would definitely make you stick out a little bit. Something just to let them know, hey, thanks for the interview. I enjoyed meeting you guys. I'm excited for the opportunities, things like that. It's a little thing. It's very easy, and not a lot of people do it.
It's amazing how many people don't do that.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised. I mean, probably for every 10 interviews, one person maybe will send an email.
A follow-up.
I've never gotten a card or a letter. Not that you have to do that. I think an email is perfectly fine.
Sure.
But I'm actually surprised at the people who don't follow up.
Yeah, I know. It's
Either you think you bombed the interview that bad that there's no point in following up, or
you're so confident.
You're so confident.
I'm just waiting.
I don't even need to.
Yeah. They better call me.
Yeah.
But just considering, how difficult it is in this day and age to get an in-person interview, and then once you get that, you want to make sure you're following it up appropriately, so you're staying on their mind. Because, ultimately, there could be 100 applicants for that one job. So, and it's not, the point of interviews is not for a potential employee to come in and perform and show off how great they are, but at the same time, the people are going to be talking to a lot of different people, and you really need to do something to step out that's going to make them remember you.
And really, it's
every other person was like, this person's good on paper. Decent experience.
It's the other bookend. Obviously, your research and putting your time in before the interview is just as important as the other end of the interview, and finding those ways of being different and sticking out and making yourself, making yourself rememberable. It's just as important as research in the beginning.
For sure. Also very helpful to provide good references when you're applying. Definitely volunteer. Some references to the people that are interviewing you. Personally, I prefer those to be either colleagues or former supervisors of yours. I generally prefer to talk to somebody who worked with you, not necessarily a friend or somebody that you knew through networking or whatever that may be, because your relationship with a friend is very different than your relationship with people you actually work with on a daily basis.
And I think for people just coming out of college, a teacher, like a professor, or somebody that you would have worked with at the school, either on a committee or sorority, something like that, where it is a more professional relationship. I think to add a friend on there, it's not going to hurt.
It doesn't hurt.
But have some professional.
The interviewer is going to take that into consideration. If you're 21 or whatever, just coming to school, if you put in a family friend or somebody, not a relative, but a family friend who may be older, who has work experience, whatever, they would take that into account.
Because personally, I'm looking primarily for someone who can vouch for your work ethic. We want to make sure that you're going to be able to do the job, you're going to be here to do it, you're not going to flake out, whatever that may be. Somebody who's going to personally vouch for you to do a job, and that's ultimately what you need. When you get into having friends and things like that, I'm like, of course they're going to say nice things about you.
Or your mom. Don't put your mom on there either.
Don't put the person who gave birth to you.
Yeah. She automatically thinks you're the best.
Anybody else? For sure. Other things to do afterwards. Anything else to think about afterwards, after an interview? That's okay. So obviously, we talked about coming with questions. That's some great, as far as advice. Make sure you're.
I will say one other thing. We always say, if you have further questions, send us an email. And I think, sometimes when you're in the moment and you're nervous, you're sitting in the interview, you may not think of questions, but do email them those questions, because even if you didn't ask it in the interview and you get home and you're like, oh man, I should have asked about this or this, send them an email. That employer is going to be happy to know that even if you couldn't come up with any questions, you had it all in the interview, that when you got home and you thought about it for a second, you did come up with some constructive questions.
And
it shows that you're thinking about it. It shows that you're
after
still interested.
The fact.
Exactly. Just another way you can show engagement and interest in the job. Obviously, we've talked about this a little bit. Overall, you need to be focusing on your fit for the job, not necessarily, I come with this amount of experience, I come with this amount of education. Companies, that looks good and they kind of expect it, but that's not what's going to get you the job. Your experience isn't going to get you the job, and your education isn't going to get you the job. What's going to get you the job is how you show them that you are a fit for the company, how you engage with them, how you like the work that they do, you're interested in the type of work. An overall fit is what people are looking for, not necessarily somebody with 50 years of experience and 50 years of volunteer work.
Well, and there's a lot of times, and this is true for a lot of companies, that they would rather hire somebody who doesn't necessarily have the education. If two people come to an interview, one has a stacked resume with, college education, a ton of experience, but is just here. They didn't do the stuff to prepare for the interview. They didn't come early. They didn't show interest. And then somebody over here who just, graduated high school or maybe got an associate's degree or whatever it may be, and they come to the interview, they're on fire. You can tell that they are willing to put in the work and that they have that charisma about them that's going to push forward, and they're willing to be a learn-it-all and to just soak in everything that their supervisors are going to tell them. I will hire this person with no education 10 times out of 10.
Absolutely. That's totally the way we operate here. I'm sure tons of other companies would operate the same way.
Yeah. You can teach anybody a job more times than not. If they,
not to say that education isn't important. Obviously, it's very important.
But everybody's going to learn the job anyway.
Right.
So there's a good chance if you have those skills that you're going to be able to learn the job.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's really all about coming to the interview in fuego, as they say.
So, yeah. So it's great to have that education, that background, but definitely couple that with an enormous amount of interest in the job when you come here. Don't think that, just my resume is going to speak for itself. No, we need you to speak for yourself. If you're at a job interview, you're the one that has to do the work.
And a lot of times we'll come out of interviews and we'll say, they sold themselves.
Yeah.
And so even the resume may not be that great, or, they might not have a ton of experience, but they sold themselves.
Right.
And that's huge. You're your biggest advocate in an interview. You're the one who is asking for the job.
Yep.
Tell me why you want it.
For sure. And, we don't want the resume to speak for you, obviously, but at the same time, one thing that people are not doing as much these days is actually bringing a paper copy of their resume to a job that they're interviewing for. I don't know, I guess people are just assuming that people already have it, or it's online, or whatever that may be.
Well, and we are in 2017, and we are in the, digital world. So maybe a lot of times they just think like, oh, well, they'll just have a copy of it.
Yeah, but there's always that, going back to the follow-up, sending the email, that's 2017, or sending a card, that's old school.
Right.
I think those old school tactics, lasted for so long because they were so good.
Yeah.
So
it showed your interest.
We could keep up doing those things, and stand out by doing those things. That helps the interview.
And I think it's also helpful when I see them break out a pen and paper. And so during the questions, sometimes they have their questions written down, which I think might be a good idea if you are a nervous kind of person and you're going to be nervous. Well, write down the questions before the interview and show them that, again, I prepared, I got my questions. And write down the answers, because a lot of times when you're in the interview, there's so much back and forth going on, and there's so much information.
So quick.
Right, it's so quick.
So quickly,
and then when you get home, you're like, well, what did they say about that? Like, I would totally forget. So that does show me as well that they are interested in not just asking questions because you're supposed to ask questions in an interview, but they're asking questions because they want to know the answers to these.
For sure. Another big one, I think, is showing your flexibility or your ability to adapt to a different work environment. You may, people bounce around from industry to industry these days. Nobody just goes and does one thing anymore. That's just not a thing that people do. So you definitely need to show that you are ready to adapt to a new way of doing things. I'd rather hire somebody who shows that they can do that. They can take on different types of things, rather than worry that this person's got so many
one
years
mold,
of this one particular thing, and it worries, makes me worry that they're not going to be able to adapt to the way that a different company does things. So not to say that that's a bad thing, that somebody works at one place for a long time. I mean, that's more power to them. But at the same time, when you're interviewing, you need to be able to show your ability to adapt and change, and a lot of that goes back to just doing research and understanding how the company works.
And I think it's different. If you're going to interview at I don't know, Wells Fargo or IBM or Microsoft, or they have their system set in place. So you know, you're going to walk onto that job and you're going to get a full training, and this is the box that you stay in, and don't step out of it because it's not really your place. That's different than if you're going to interview at a small company, a smaller company who has a very open, and again, this all comes from research, open communication, collaboration, all of that, to go into that interview with a flexible mentality of, you know what, if I need to be here, I can be used here, or I can go over here and I can do this. The more flexible you are, the more secure your job is, really.
Absolutely.
If you're able to be used in different departments and products, then your job is more secure than just, I only know this one thing, so that's it.
Make yourself as valuable to the company as possible.
Right.
Learn as many things as you can.
You know, and provide skills that may not even have something to do with that job description. You know, if you have, you know, background in carpentry or something, you know, you could always, you know, provide something, especially for a smaller company that can't afford a contractor to come in or something like that. You know?
The extracurricular activities.
Yes.
And there's, you know, there's always things that we have here going on in our office that, you know, we're not necessarily paid for it. For example, I do events on the side. But that's my contribution. That's my extracurricular activity. That's my, like, you know what? I have fun doing this, and I might as well help out the company by planning, you know, different events throughout the year. Why not?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So definitely show your flexibility, show your motivation. That's, you know, ultimately what people are looking for. They want to see why you're motivated to do that particular job. Another thing to keep in mind, and this is, you know, before an interview, after an interview, your social media presence is important these days. People are going to look at it. You apply for a job, they're going to check you out on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever you may be. It's just the modern age. You need to keep aware of that and make sure there's nothing that would be just outright offensive. Or,
well, and there's been times that, you know, I've read a resume, looks good. Let's bring this person in for an interview. And I search them on Facebook, and their Facebook wall or their Twitter, it's just flooded with profanity or pictures, and we don't want, like, not many employers are going to invite that into their office. Even though that is your personal life and that may not be how you act at work, it's still a part of who you are.
That's true.
And so I would rather be safe than sorry. If that's how you want your social media to be, lock it, block, you know, make it so where an employer can't look you up, or they only see your cover photo and, you know, put a picture of a sunset or a bunny or something. I don't know, but be smart when it comes to that. You're interviewing, you're putting your resume out there, but yet you're killing yourself right off the, you know, it's just like right off the bat, you're done.
You just don't want to have anything that's going to be considered, you know, obscene or ridiculous to, you know, the average person. You know, just because, you know, you feel the urge to share every thought, you know, that may come your way, doesn't necessarily mean that sentiment is going to be reflected by the people that are interviewing you, or ultimately the clientele of the people they're interviewing you, who are going to eventually find you out. They'll look you up. They'll, you know, your clients.
Well, and I know it's really important too. Some companies have an About Us page, and so, you know, specifically in our company, you know, we have products that are, you know, for all different kind of industry types. And the trucker, you know, we have a express truck tax, which is, you know, a tax for the truckers. The truckers probably aren't going to go on our website and look at who we are, but we also have products for CPAs and small business owners. They probably will scour around to try to find, who are we and who am I talking to? Oh, I spoke to Joel today on the phone. Oh, that's what he looks like. Oh, Joel, and he can go and now search. And so that then turns back on the company of who are their employees. And I always like to have my character go before me. I always want my character to go before I even get there, so that they know who I am at the core. And if that's obscene and nasty, you just don't want that. There's no need for it.
Right. Definitely just put your best face forward.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. I think we pretty much covered that. Is there anything else y'all can think of that we haven't talked about?
What about smell?
Smell? Do we have a...
I have a very sensitive nose.
Wear Too much
Like
perfume,
too much cologne,
Or
the
don't
other way.
don't smoke a cigarette out in the parking lot and hey, I'm here for my interview, and it's like, okay, your smoke lines around your mouth aren't even like uncurled yet.
Well, I think that covers it today. Thanks for joining us, and stick around next week to see what we're talking about.